Hello everyone, and welcome back to Botanic Haven, your go-to channel for all things gardening, plant care, and creating those beautiful green spaces both inside your home and out in your yard. I'm so glad you're here today because we're about to dive into something really exciting, something that might change the way you think about winter gardening entirely. You see, most people assume that December is a time to put the tools away, close up the greenhouse, and wait for spring to arrive. But what if I told you that December is actually one of the most powerful months for setting yourself up for an incredible harvest in 2026? That's right, while your neighbours are sipping hot chocolate and scrolling through seed catalogues, you could be out there planting crops that will give you a head start, stronger plants, and yields that'll make everyone ask what your secret is. Today we're going to talk about 10 crops you should definitely plant in December to get a great harvest in the coming year. And I'm going to share some stories, practical tips, and real experiences that'll help you make the most of this quiet, often overlooked season. So let's start with something that really embodies the whole philosophy of winter planting, and that's spinach. Now, I'm not talking about just any spinach here. I'm talking about those cold-loving, deep-rooted, overwintering varieties that seem to understand winter better than we do. There's this gardener I know, Daisy, who lives up in a cooler zone, and she used to think spinach was strictly a spring crop. But one year, almost by accident, she planted some spinach seeds in early December under a simple row cover. And what happened next amazed her. While the days got shorter and the temperatures dropped, her spinach didn't panic or wither away. Instead, it quietly developed this incredibly strong root system, far more robust than anything she'd seen from spring sowings. When March rolled around and her spring-planted spinach was just starting to germinate, Daisy's December spinach was already producing thick, dark green leaves that tasted sweeter and more tender than any spinach she'd ever grown. That's the magic of December spinach. The cold weather doesn't hurt it, it strengthens it. The plants spend the winter months building their foundation underground, and when the light returns and temperatures start to rise, they explode into growth much faster than their spring-sown cousins. If you're someone who loves fresh greens but hates how quickly store-bought spinach turns to mush in the fridge, this is going to feel like a revelation. You'll have handfuls of fresh, homegrown spinach ready to harvest weeks, sometimes even months, before anyone else in your neighbourhood. And here's another bonus. Spinach grown through the winter tends to be more nutritious, packed with vitamins and minerals because it's growing slowly and steadily instead of being rushed by heat. Now, if spinach is the quiet achiever, then kale is the superstar that gets better the harder things get. I want to talk about frost-sweetened kale next because it's one of those crops that almost feels like it was designed specifically for December planting. You've probably heard people say that kale tastes better after a frost, and it's absolutely true. When temperatures drop and frost touches those leaves, something remarkable happens inside the plant. Starches get converted into sugars, which means the kale becomes sweeter, more tender, and way less bitter than the summer-grown stuff. I remember talking to Oliver, another passionate gardener who grows food for his family year-round, and he told me that he used to avoid kale because he found it too tough and bitter. But then he tried planting it in December, and after a few frosty nights, he harvested some leaves and was genuinely shocked. It tasted completely different, almost like a different vegetable altogether. Kale is the crop for people who want reliability and resilience. It doesn't mind a little cold wind, it doesn't sulk when snow falls, and it just keeps on producing. When you plant kale in December, you're giving it time to establish strong roots before the real cold sets in. By the time spring arrives, you'll have mature plants ready to feed you continuously for months. And if you choose varieties like Winterbor or Lacinato, you're looking at plants that can handle serious cold without any fuss at all. The other wonderful thing about kale is how forgiving it is. Even if you're new to gardening or if your soil isn't perfect, kale will still grow. It's one of those generous plants that rewards even the smallest effort with abundant harvests. If this guide has helped you, write 1 in the comments, and if not, write 0. This way, I'll know which tips are most useful for your garden. Let's keep going because we have so much more to cover, and I promise every single crop we talk about today has its own story and its own special way of making December planting worthwhile. Another group of crops that absolutely love December planting are the Asian greens, and these are some of my personal favourites because they're fast, flavourful, and incredibly versatile. I'm talking about bok choy, mizuna, tatsoi, and mustard greens. These plants don't just tolerate cold weather, they actually prefer it. In warmer months, many of these greens bolt quickly, shooting up flower stalks before you can harvest them properly, but in December they settle into a calm, steady growth pattern. There's this gardener named Rose who grows in a small urban space with just a few raised beds, and she told me that Asian greens changed her whole relationship with winter gardening. She used to think winter was a dead season, but once she started planting mizuna and bok choy in December, she realized she could have fresh, crunchy greens for stir-fries, noodle bowls, and salads all through the coldest months. These greens grow fast too, which is great if you're someone who likes to see results quickly. Within a few weeks, you can start harvesting baby leaves, and the plants will keep producing as long as you don't harvest them too aggressively. The flavors are incredible too. Mizuna has this peppery, slightly spicy taste that wakes up any dish, while bok choy is mild and sweet, perfect for soups and sautés. And here's a little secret that Rose shared with me. If you plant these greens under a simple cold frame or even just a row cover, they'll grow even faster and stay more protected from the harshest weather. You don't need anything fancy, just a basic structure to keep the worst of the wind and frost off the leaves, and you'll be amazed at how productive these plants can be. Now let's talk about something that might surprise you, and that's garlic. December is actually one of the best times to plant garlic, especially if you're in a region with cold winters. Garlic needs a period of cold to develop properly, and when you plant it in December, you're giving it exactly what it needs to produce big, healthy bulbs by next summer. I think a lot of people are intimidated by garlic because it seems like this mysterious crop, but honestly, it's one of the easiest things you can grow. You just take individual cloves, stick them in the ground pointy side up, cover them with a bit of soil and mulch, and then you wait. That's it. Through the winter, those cloves will start developing roots, and when spring comes, green shoots will emerge and grow tall and strong. By midsummer, you'll have your own homegrown garlic. And trust me, once you taste garlic, you've grown yourself. You'll never want to go back to store-bought. There's a story about a gardener named Lucas who started growing garlic, almost on a whim. He had a small patch of empty soil in December and figured he'd try planting a few cloves just to see what happened. He didn't expect much, but the following summer, he pulled up these gorgeous fat bulbs with tight, papery skins, and the flavor was incredible, sharp and pungent and full of character. Now Lucas plants garlic every single December, and he's even started saving his best bulbs to replant year after year, which is a wonderful way to develop your own locally adapted garlic that gets better over time. Let's move on to another group of crops that really shine when planted in December, and these are the root vegetables, specifically carrots, beets, and turnips. Now, depending on your climate, you might need a bit of protection for these, like a cold frame or a low tunnel, but the results are absolutely worth it. Root vegetables grown in cool weather are sweeter, crisper, and more flavorful than the ones you grow in summer. The cold weather does something magical to them. It converts the starches inside the roots into sugars, which means every bite tastes better. I've heard people describe winter-grown carrots as candy-like, and I have to say, that's not an exaggeration. There's a gardener named Ivy who focuses almost entirely on root crops, and she told me that she used to plant carrots in spring and always found them a bit woody and bland. But then she tried planting them in December under a simple plastic tunnel, and when she pulled them up in late winter, she couldn't believe the difference. They were sweet, juicy, and had this incredible crisp texture. Beets and turnips work the same way. They're humble, unpretentious crops that don't demand much attention, but they reward you with reliable, filling harvests that make you feel genuinely self-sufficient. When you plant these roots in December, the seeds settle into the cool soil and germinate slowly. There's no rush, no pressure, just steady, quiet growth. And by the time spring rolls around, you'll have roots ready to harvest while everyone else is just starting to sow their seeds. Now I want to talk about something that might not be on everyone's radar, but it absolutely should be, and that's fava beans, also called broad beans. These are some of the most underrated crops for winter planting, and they're perfect for December because they actually thrive in cool weather. Most beans sulk and refuse to sprout unless the soil is warm and comfortable, but fava beans are the complete opposite. They love the cold. When you plant them in December, something remarkable happens beneath the surface. The seeds germinate slowly, anchoring themselves deeply, and as they grow, they do something incredibly valuable. They fix nitrogen into your soil. That means they're not just feeding you, they're also enriching your garden for the next round of crops. Your tomatoes, peppers, and squash will thank you for planting fava beans because they'll have a nutrient-rich foundation to grow from. Fava beans are also incredibly productive. One small patch can give you pounds and pounds of beans, and the flavor is rich, creamy, and totally different from regular green beans. There's a tradition in many Mediterranean countries of planting fava beans in late autumn or early winter, and gardeners there know that these beans will not only survive the cold, but actually become stronger because of it. If you're someone who wants to grow something that nourishes you and improves your soil at the same time, fava beans are the quiet heroes you've been looking for. Let's talk about something quick and cheerful, and that's radishes. Radishes are one of the fastest growing crops you can plant, and December is a great time to get them in the ground if you have mild winters or if you're growing under cover. Radishes don't need a lot of space, they don't need fancy soil, and they certainly don't need much time. Within a few weeks, you can be pulling up crisp, peppery bulbs that add a burst of flavor and color to salads, tacos, and sandwiches. I love radishes because they give you that instant gratification that keeps you motivated during the slower months. You plant them, you wait just a little while, and then boom, you've got food. There's something deeply satisfying about that. And if you choose winter varieties like black Spanish or watermelon radish, you'll get even better results because these types are specifically bred to handle cooler temperatures. Radishes are also great companion plants. If you plant them alongside your slower growing crops like carrots or beets, the radishes will mature and be harvested long before the other crops need the space, which means you're using your garden efficiently and getting multiple harvests from the same area. Herbs are another category that deserves attention when we talk about December planting, and I want to highlight three in particular: parsley, cilantro, and sorrel. These herbs might seem humble, but when grown in winter, they become some of the most valuable crops in your garden. They're the flavors that lift a dish from ordinary to memorable, and December is a surprisingly powerful time to start them. Many gardeners don't realize this, but herbs often prefer the cool, steady environment of winter over the heat and rush of summer. Parsley, for example, grows stronger and more aromatic when it begins its journey in cold soil. It develops deep taproot systems that allow it to flourish with almost no effort from you once spring arrives. Plant it now and you'll enjoy leaves that are richer, darker, and far more flavorful than anything wrapped in plastic at the store. Cilantro, on the other hand, is famously tricky in warm weather because it bolts at the first hint of heat, shooting up flowers before you ever get a proper harvest. But in December, cilantro relaxes. It settles into a slow, steady growth pattern, and you can harvest fresh leaves for weeks or even months without it going to seed. And then there's sorrel, which is one of those forgotten herbs that more people should grow. It has this bright, lemony flavour that's perfect for sauces, soups and salads, and it's incredibly hardy. Once you plant sorrel, it'll come back year after year, giving you harvests with zero effort. Onions are another crop that makes perfect sense for December planting, and I'm talking specifically about onion sets and bunching onions. Onion sets are these little baby onions that you plant in the ground, and they spend the winter quietly developing roots. By spring, they shoot up green growth, and by summer you've got full-sized onions ready to harvest, cure, and store for months. Bunching onions, also called scallions or green onions, are even faster. You plant them in December, give them a bit of mulch to protect them from the worst cold, and they'll establish deep, sturdy roots. Come spring, you'll have a non-stop supply of fresh green onion flavour that's perfect for everything from omelettes to soups to quick stir-fries. These are the kinds of crops that make you feel like a smart, efficient gardener because you're using time that would otherwise be wasted. Instead of waiting for spring and then rushing to get everything planted, you're spreading out the work and setting yourself up for earlier, more abundant harvests. And onions are one of those crops that store really well, so even after you harvest them, you'll have fresh, homegrown onions on hand for months. Finally, I want to mention one more crop that's absolutely perfect for December planting, and that's lettuce, specifically cold hardy varieties like Winter Density or Arctic King. Now, lettuce can be a bit more finicky than some of the other crops we've talked about, and it usually needs some protection like a cold frame or a simple hoop house. But if you can provide that, the rewards are incredible. Imagine stepping outside on a cold January morning and picking fresh, crisp lettuce leaves for your lunch. That's the kind of thing that makes winter gardening feel magical. Lettuce grown in cool weather doesn't get bitter the way summer lettuce does. It stays sweet, tender, and mild, and it grows at a pace that lets you harvest outer leaves continuously without killing the plant. There's a technique called cut and come again harvesting, where you snip off the outer leaves and let the center keep growing, and it works beautifully with winter lettuce. You get multiple harvests from the same plants, and you're never overwhelmed with more lettuce than you can eat, which is a common problem in spring when everything matures at once. So there you have it, 10 crops that you should definitely consider planting in December to set yourself up for a fantastic harvest in 2026. We've covered spinach, kale, Asian greens, garlic, root vegetables like carrots and beets, fava beans, radishes, herbs like parsley and cilantro, onions and lettuce. Each of these crops has its own personality, its own strengths, and its own way of making winter gardening productive and rewarding. The key is to think of December not as the end of the gardening season, but as the beginning of the next one. When you plant in December, you're working with nature instead of against it. You're giving your plants time to establish strong roots. You're letting them experience the cold they need to thrive. And you're setting yourself up to harvest earlier and more abundantly than gardeners who wait for spring. And honestly, there's something deeply satisfying about being out in the garden in December. The air is crisp, the world is quiet, and you feel like you're in on a secret that most people don't know. While others are indoors waiting for spring, you're planting seeds, nurturing life, and preparing for the abundance that's coming. You don't need a huge space to do this either. Even if you only have a small balcony, a few pots, or a tiny raised bed, you can plant some of these crops and experience the magic of winter gardening. Start small if you need to. Pick 2 or 3 crops from this list that appeal to you, get them in the ground this December, and see what happens. I think you'll be amazed at the results. Gardening is all about experimentation, learning, and building a relationship with your plants and your land. Every garden is different, every climate is unique, and the only way to really know what works for you is to try. So go ahead, grab your seeds, pull on your gloves, and get planting. December is waiting, and so is your 2026 harvest. Thank you so much for spending this time with me here on Botanic Haven, and I'll see you in the next video where we'll keep exploring the wonderful world of plants, gardens, and green growing things. Happy planting, everyone.